Aaron Lutzi, the boys are back. Holy smokes, the emergency bro pod. How you doing, buddy?
The most overdue bro pod in all of history.
Yeah, there's not really an occasion that makes this the emergency bro pod other than like, holy smokes, we need to actually get together and record thoughts on everything that has happened for both of our respective businesses and lives over the last month or so. But yeah, it feels like it's been a long time since the two of us have caught up, buddy.
It's been a pretty big last couple months, hasn't it? I mean,
Monster.
we got to see each other for a grand total of about 15 minutes at TrailCon,
I know.
I
It's
think.
brutal.
That was yeah, pretty awesome though. I mean, no complaints, zero complaints. It was TrailCon specifically was such a amazing moment for I think both of us to be kind of in it with all of our people. And I don't know what it was like for you. I'm really curious to sort of hear your experience, but for me that was really the first time that I got to be amongst so many of the listeners of Second Nature. I mean, we've definitely done a bunch of Portland meetups where there's been, 10 to 12 people come out and we get to throw high fives and have, of course, met people one off, but like there were a lot of Second Nature listeners at TrailCon, and that was so cool to just meet so many new people all at once.
Yeah,
Incredible.
so we'll talk more about it a little later in the episode, but just for the audience, I actually had to miss your panel on the first day of TrailCon because we were going to record our trailgating show for Free Trail at that same exact time. And I still haven't been able to listen to your panel, but we will publish it either here or in the Free Trail feed, maybe even both eventually. But it was hilarious because during that panel, I got multiple text messages just saying, "Hey, your boy Lutzi's crushing it up there as the moderator." So anyway, thank you, buddy. But yeah, anyway, let's not go too deep into TrailCon. Obviously, we've talked about it so much. You and Steve did a great episode on it. I have a couple of things that I want to add when we get around to it, but I want to start catching up with your trip to China. It's probably been at least a month now, but I know it blew your mind in a lot of ways. We talked about it on the phone just quickly, but we haven't been able to do a deep review of it. So start wherever is most appropriate. Probably remind the listeners what you have going on in China, and then we can start talking about your trip.
I have a lot of thoughts on this trip. It's definitely kind of sunk in now that I've been home for a little bit. So, as a primer to why I went to China, about 2 years ago, I met some people through a mutual friend, and they basically work in the bike industry in China. And they had put on sort of like the Sea Otter Festival in China already. So they're putting on events. They're working in the industry. They're doing their thing over there. They came over to China, and they said we want to work with somebody who creates content, and we want to work with somebody who's like really focused in on helping the sport grow, working with beginner and intermediate riders, actually like learn skills and get excited about the sport, which is literally like exactly what I do. I was like, I'm your guy. And on top of that, I have family in China. I have kids that speak Mandarin. Like we are very, very aligned like I've been there. I've, probably 6 or 7 times at this point. So it was like, yeah, I'm down. I'm super down. And so what we started doing was taking all of my long form and short form content and repurposing it for all of the social media channels in China because they don't have YouTube, they don't have Instagram, they have Bilibili, they have WeChat, they have like 9 different platforms. So basically what they did was they took all my content, they put subtitles on it, they posted everything in with the titles, the comments, everything was in Chinese so that like hit the audience the right way. And they would actually do the responses for me as well so that there was interaction, there was engagement actually happening, not just like some random stuff getting posted up with no intention. So they've been doing a really good job helping me kind of reach a new audience, and I think it's made a pretty meaningful impact over there as well. Basically, fast forward 2 years, we're doing about a million views a month combined on those 9 channels. And this year at Sea Otter, they came over again and we went around to all the booths and we were filming, stuff for the channel. And they said, hey, it would be really helpful if you came over to China and actually film some stuff in China just to let the audience know that like you're not just copy pasting and putting it on, but you actually have like the intention of doing stuff here and working with us, and that it's not just, us taking content and putting it on the channel. So I was like, yeah, absolutely. I'm down. I want to see like what has China got to offer for riding, and let me, go explore a new part of the country. I have so many ideas and stuff I'd love to do over there, even if it's not this trip, like in the future. I've just a billion ideas of what we could do. So I went to China. They rolled out the red carpet and just put together this insane itinerary for me, which included, but is not limited to, going in a flying car, uh, riding in a vehicle that could float on the water, like an electric vehicle that just like turned, it was like a car and then it turned into a boat and then it turned back into a car. Anyway, they let me go to the DJI factory, which DJI most people know is like the camera company, but they also make an e-bike motor. And in the basement of this like super high tech camera facility, there's actually like a mountain bike testing facility that had dirt, and I get to ride like their new e-bike motor and stuff like that. So these guys just showed me this incredible time over there, and we created a ton of really great content. That video is going to come out in a couple weeks. What was really interesting to me on the first day was I was riding around just doing like a little street ride to get my blood flowing a little bit. And all of a sudden, these kids start showing up. I think I've been to China enough times to like not totally underestimate it, but this even blew me away. All these kids, probably like, 16, 17 years old, rolling up to me on the sickest bikes I've ever seen. And also to like take pictures with me because they knew who I was. A, I was blown away that they knew who I was. B, all these kids like coming home from school on like decked out Santa Cruz bikes. I think a lot of people have, their own opinions about China, and when you see this video, it's going to completely rewrite a lot of that, I think, because the nature of how, yeah, like the what they have and what they're spending money on over there, and stuff was a lot different than what I think a lot of people will expect. So to see a bunch of kids rolling up on like $5,000, $10,000 bikes was not in like most people's view of what you would expect in China. So that was like one of the first moments that kind of broke my frame on the trip. And to sort of fast forward through some of this stuff, I got to see a lot, I got to ride a lot, but really we ended up landing on sort of the bigger vision for Super Rider in China as a result, which is where this gets really exciting. And it's one thing for me to go over there and make content, once a year or whatever, and I'd be totally happy doing that, and then just coming back over here, which I think that piece of content is going to perform really, really well. So it's kind of this great double whammy of like the Chinese audience is going to be excited that you came to China, but also I feel like the American audience and, well, the rest of the YouTube audience is going to be like pretty interested to see firsthand like what was that like. But the bigger vision actually is we have a partnership forming with a real estate developer over there in China. The um the the mall culture is like a much bigger thing than it is here. People over there kind of like want to hang out with each other in public, versus over here we just order stuff off Amazon. And not to say they don't have delivery over there, because they certainly do, but um it's like a culture to go to malls. And so like they took me to all
Yeah,
these
like in-person
malls.
shopping is still cool in most of Asia. I mean, I've never been to China, but certainly in Japan that's the case too.
Yeah, yeah. And so they took me to all these malls while I was there. And they're like, yeah, look at this place. They took me to this mall called the Do Nothing Mall. And it was like a sports themed mall. I saw the biggest bouldering gym I've ever seen in my entire life. And it was inside a mall. And then in the first floor of the mall, there was an indoor skate park in the mall. And then you walk outside, there's an outdoor skate park. There's a basketball court, there's a tennis court. Like everywhere you go in the mall, there's all these different places to do activities, but then there's also supporting businesses. And what I saw also while I was over there, I want to go down this tangent because I find this like really interesting. Uh, they also had every single brand I've ever seen in like outdoor sports. There was an Arc'teryx store, there was a Hoka store, Solomon store. I saw every brand. I even went into a Valence shop at one point, which I didn't even know that was a thing. I mean, I know what Valence is, but I didn't know that Arc'teryx's highest end brand actually had retail. So they had all these shops. The one thing that I didn't see when I was over there was a Nike store. I saw Adidas. I saw every brand under the sun except for Nike. I did see a Jordan store, but the guys that I was with said, yeah, Jordan's like fashion over here, so that's why it's there. But you won't see a Nike store that often because Anta and Li Ning are crushing it, and like they're not even going to give Nike a foothold. It's interesting to me that like, I mean, the Anta store was huge, and they actually own 44% of Amer Sports, which is kind of interesting. That might be why they've allowed Solomon and some of those brands to get a foothold in the retail spaces. But that to me was really interesting because I just assumed that Nike was ubiquitous.
This is
But,
perfect foreshadowing to something I want to talk about, but keep going.
okay. So to get back on track, we have a relationship with a real estate group over there who owns the sports mall that I went to, and they own a bunch of those sports malls. And so the idea that was brought up while I was over there was, what if we had a super rider shop in this mall? You already have the following where people are going to come out, but then we activate the shop by putting on like the event concepts that you've had at the mall and around the mall and really like blow it up and then bring all your partners over to be sold at your shop. What would that look like? There aren't really a lot of mountain bike shops, like specific mountain bike shops. Like you could be early on the whole mountain bike movement in China and represent that. And what would that open up for content? What would that open up for partnership discussions? Like this could get insane real quick. So ultimately I was like, yeah, that sounds great, guys. uh, and we're gonna chase it down and see what we can do. The the discussion with the real estate group is not just for one shop. Like, and this is the thing over there, when they commit to stuff, they fully commit, whether it's flying cars or, I mean, we went to this car show and they took me to the trade show zone for it or whatever. And it was like 20 giant aircraft hangars. And they're like, this is actually the world's largest trade show facility. I'm like, I believe it. I'm like, well, what's that building over there? They're like, oh, that? Yeah, that's the world's largest indoor ski hill. I'm like, of course it is.
Okay,
And-
wait, just time out for a sec because I want to lead you down this path, but I just want to just pause for a moment and reinforce for the listeners that Super Rider is going to have brick and mortar retail locations in China. It's incredible. I mean, this is like such an interesting thing that will be, I'm sure, a story that we can revisit in many, many future episodes. But
if
speaking of the word future, I remember you texting me while you were in China, something to the effect of it's the future over here. And you were beginning to just sort of describe it now, but what for the audience here, like, and for me, I mean, I've never been to mainland China. I've been to Hong Kong just once, but from everything I've heard and something I want to talk about here in a second is that China really is becoming a very advanced economy, and it's when you visit, it's incredibly apparent. So the best you can, if you could describe what makes China so futuristic.
Wow. There's a lot to talk about. One of the things that I think is they just seem very committed to following through on stuff. Like we get so caught up in our own, BS over here that we get in our own way so frequently. And it just seems like when they commit to something over there, they just go for it. Like over here, we should have flying cars. Well, there's a rule against that, or there's a rule against this, or there's a safety issue, or whatever. or somebody's got an opinion about it. We're not going to do it. Over there, it's like we should have flying cars. And they're like, yeah, we should. All right, what do we need to do? And well, I guess it would just look like a giant drone, wouldn't it? All right, well, let's make one and see. Like a lot of the stuff over there isn't necessarily new idea. It's just innovation off of stuff that maybe came up somewhere else. They didn't have, electric cars until Tesla kind of kicked things off. But now there's like 50 electric car companies in China, and they just follow through so well. Like when I was over there, I saw this meme pop up on my Instagram because of course I was running a VPN, and it was like uh the Highway 1, around Big Sur has been closed for the last 4 years. So I've been trying to build like a half mile of road. In that same time, China has built 3,000 miles of train track, of high speed rail around their country. And it's just sort of like that, but at scale where, like, oh yeah, we should totally have electric cars because it's good for the environment or whatever. And then America goes on this side quest about hating Elon Musk, and China goes like, actually, we're gonna, create 50 car companies, and every electronics company is gonna have their own car company, and you're gonna get a special license plate, which is gonna give you this, this, and this, and like they just follow through on stuff, and
It's
that,
incredible. I mean,
yeah,
it's so interesting to hear about. And one of the things that you said to me when we talked about this on the phone was just that everybody's on the same page over there in a way that's not the case here in the US. Obviously, for the last decade, our culture has been in a very tumultuous moment, a lot of division, a lot of disagreement. And in China, I'm sure they deal with their own political and cultural
sure.
issues, but for the most part, there is a momentum behind projects and things can be accomplished at a speed that we can't replicate here in the US. I think this is, I don't know, a really interesting moment in world history. And obviously, we're looking at things through the lens of outdoor and sport in general. But I don't know. To me, I'm preoccupied about it. Like I'm nervous about it. And now I'm interested in like how do we put free trail in a position to where, we might be able to contribute to the trail running economy in China.
It's really interesting, and I think it's difficult to talk about China, especially over here, partially because I think we have our heads in the sand about it, but also because, like there is a level of, I don't know, propaganda, or there is a level of government control. Oh, you can't access Google while you're over there, stuff like that. But like I saw with my own eyes, like it's pretty great when you have one app to do everything and you don't need to have 50 apps to do every little thing. It's pretty great when there's electric cars everywhere. And I mean, we looked at the air quality in Shenzhen when I was there, like on the app or whatever, and it was better than Portland, Oregon. Like I'm not saying all of China is this way, but where I was pretty great. And if it's happening there, it's probably going to happen in a lot of other places. And yeah, they have manufacturing places, and they have places where, life probably isn't as great as downtown Shenzhen, but man, where I was just like it was the future, and you could see them just grinding away, only focused on trying to like get to that next level and trying to develop stuff. And like the flying car I was in, they were like, yeah, this is the demo, but we have 160 air taxi lines already approved in Shenzhen. So probably the next time you come back here, you'll be able to take this thing from point A to point B. Like they're not slowing down, and they're not getting in their own way. And I think that's a very feels sometimes like an American thing to just get in our own way.
Yeah. I mean, and it makes me nervous as a proud American that if we don't start getting out of our own way a little bit more and get on the same page a little bit more, that we're gonna be left in the dust. And I want to start getting to that here in a second. But one thing that you also mentioned to me on the phone that I think our audience is probably wondering, like my question to you was like, well, doesn't it feel like a communist country? And you had a very interesting response.
Oh, I mean, it's very capitalistic now. Like that, they were a communist country. The name of the political party has the word communist in it, but it's not. That's not the case. Like it's conspicuous consumption at large. Like they are going to Starbucks. They are buying luxury goods. Like the kids have $10,000 mountain bikes. Like it's not what anybody thinks it is. And look, one of the things that brands do as they mature. They develop a division called emerging markets, and you go try to find the places in the world that you could sell your goods to, increase your bottom line. I'm listening to the Acquired episode with Microsoft right now, and they're talking about how they opened in Japan, and for years it was 50% of their income, and now even today their international markets represent almost half their business. And so from my perspective, I'm like, okay, well, where can I go where I can tap into a new market? Most of the European countries can already access what I'm doing. How might I actually develop my brand beyond the borders of YouTube? Here's an opportunity. And this is, in my mind, the emerging market, like the sports of outdoor are developing, the investment is there, the excitement is there. Obviously, if people are watching my videos a million times a month, then I've got something to go off of. It's proven. And this first trip was just like, okay, yeah, this is definitely a bigger opportunity than I thought. And the response from the businesses there to say, like, we will absolutely plug you in and support, you know, you coming here and doing stuff, like, okay, this is an interesting path worth going. And more importantly, maybe the conversations I've had with brands over here as well, because a lot of the bike companies make their stuff in China. All the tariff stuff that's going on, all of a sudden, I'm going to open up a lane for them in a place where they don't have to pay a tariff because, well, they probably make it right down the street.
Yep.
So I've got
Okay.
now. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say this is the perfect on ramp to my conspiracy and the thing that has been in my brain that I've wanted to introduce into the podcast here for the last couple of weeks. Are we ready?
I'm ready. Let's go for it.
All right, let's see if I can actually like articulate this in a way that's intelligible. But I've been thinking a lot about the dynamic between, US China relations. I actually listened to a bunch of podcasts on this, and it was Mario that recommended the recent book about Apple's history developing their business in China, first as a manufacturing epicenter, and then also now, like, with the growing middle class there, as a place where they can sell their products to consumers. And as I think about it, with this tariff phenomenon that is so relevant in the news right now and that is impacting probably so many of our listeners and certainly so much of the broader outdoor economy, I was starting to think about what the purpose of the tariffs like actually is, because obviously the markets right now are at an all-time high, but when the tariffs were introduced, it basically tanked everything, at least temporarily. And I started to think about in what ways these tariffs might be protecting the US in a way that was not obvious, and sort of an epiphany that I had that might be totally idiotic, but I'd love to workshop it here live on the podcast, is that the tariffs are really to protect our biggest export. And Lutzi, maybe a quiz for you would be, what do you consider to be America's biggest export? Like, what might we be protecting? Do you want to take a stab at this before I launch into my soliloquy?
I think I know the answer. And actually, I read a book about this years ago called Video Night in Kathmandu, by Pico Iyer, a New York Times writer. And I think it's like culture, and specifically like Hollywood movies and stuff like that. Like,
Exactly.
I actually saw Mission Impossible while I was in China, and it was in English with Chinese subtitles.
Yeah. Okay, so you hit the nail on the head. Our biggest export as Americans is culture and brand and entertainment, and just almost like a cool factor, right? That the rest of the world looks to the US as leaders in creating aspirational products and experiences. At least that's how it's been. And then those aspirational products and experiences are oftentimes tied to the manufacturing capabilities of China and broader Asia. But for the purposes of this conversation, let's just focus on China. So then I was looking at this thing written by MIT economist, this guy named David Autor, a guy who I've never don't know anything about, never read any of his stuff. It popped up on my Twitter feed and sent me down a little bit of a rabbit hole. But again, this guy's name is David Autor from MIT. And as I understand it, he was early in identifying the potential risks of outsourcing a lot of our manufacturing to China decades ago. And there was an article that was published. I'll send you the link so you can put it in the show notes. It is paywalled, but it's worth breaking the credit card out, in my opinion. But there was a question that was posed to him in this sort of written interview of like, what worries you now as it relates to U.S. China relations and the increasingly heated competition that's emerging economically, politically, etc., between the two countries. So the question is, what worries you now? I'm going to read his answer because I think this will lead to a really fun convo. His answer is, we're in the midst of a totally different competition with China now that is much, much more important. Now we're not talking about commodity furniture and tube socks. We're talking about semiconductors and drones and aviation, electric vehicles, shipping, fusion, quantum, AI, robotics. These are the sectors where the US still maintains competitiveness, but they're extremely threatened. China's capacity for high-tech, low-cost, incredibly fast, innovative manufacturing is just unbelievable. And the Trump administration is basically fighting the war of 20 years ago, meaning with the tariffs. The loss of those jobs, was devastating to those places, meaning manufacturing towns in the rural Midwest of America. It was not devastating to the US economy as a whole. But if we lose Boeing, GM, Apple, and Intel, and that's quite possible, then that will be economically devastating. So, coming back around to my conspiracy and to my point, if we think about the Chinese equivalent of American business giants, right? So Tesla in electric vehicles. As I understand it, BYD is like
Actually bigger globally.
yeah, and an absolute giant. I was in Mexico in January of this year for my brother's birthday, and there's BYD ads everywhere, and it's like shocking, as from what I've heard, how affordable and high quality the cars are, going to this economist's point about the speed and quality of their manufacturing that can be done also at a low price.
Side note, really quickly on the BYD thing. When I was at that car show, I watched in person them charge a battery from 0 to 100% in 5 minutes. Like, when we're talking about technology, they are ahead.
Which means Tesla can't compete with that. And the only way that we protect Tesla is to make it so that BYD can't compete in the US, right? So let's go down the list a little bit more. As I understand it, the equivalent of Apple in China is a company called Xiaomi, which I think also makes electric vehicles, but I think they also make most of the cell phones and stuff. Obviously, Apple is the one of like either the first or second biggest company in the world by market cap, and a very important American institution. So if we lose to Xiaomi, I mean, massively impactful to the American economy. NVIDIA, the other biggest company in the world, as I understand it, Huawei, the big telecom giant in China, is getting competitive with semiconductors. And then to bring it back closer to our realm, outside of tech and electric vehicles, etc., you mentioned Anta, which, as I understand it, is sort of like the Nike equivalent in China, and a giant. And coming back to what I said, America's biggest export is our culture. Anta, if they were able to compete in the US, I mean, obviously they have the manufacturing, they have high quality products, but what they don't have is the culture. They don't have the brand that extends the way that Nike does. So, my point, Aaron, to pass it back to you, my big conspiracy here, to tie it all together, is that the tariffs are not necessarily to encourage reshoring of manufacturing jobs in the US. It's to make it more expensive for Chinese brands to compete in the USA. In other words, it's putting up a brick wall of protection of no, you guys have figured out manufacturing, you've figured out innovation, you've figured out how to make the best products in the world, but they haven't quite figured out the brand lane, which in my mind is probably the easier thing to develop and figure out. And so the tariff strategy is effectively the brick wall of you, all right, you've beaten us on manufacturing, you've beaten us on making good products. We will not allow you to come into the American market and beat us on culture. And if they start, like I mentioned, with BYD being ubiquitous in Mexico when I was there, if Chinese culture, if they're able to start exporting their culture, quote unquote, in the way that the US has for the last 100 years to places like Mexico, to broader Latin America, to Europe, to, broader Asia, then the US is screwed. Coming back to David Autor's point, he says, that would be economically devastating. So, maybe final little anecdote here. I was talking at TrailCon to somebody from, just call it, one of the biggest brands in the world, and he said that yeah, it's very difficult to figure out how to compete in China, and that certainly like there is a thumb on the scale for brands like Arc'teryx and Salomon, which are owned by Amer Sports, which are owned by Anta. And what I heard was that Arc'teryx is effectively now like a brand in China. It's like the brand for billionaires. Like it's the signal of wealth and coolness. And that's probably downstream of the fact that it's effectively owned by China. So anyway, just ending with that quick point on a specific outdoor brand because it touches our realm a little bit more. Lucia, I'm interested in your thoughts on my grand conspiracy that the tariffs are really to protect American culture as an export.
It's interesting to think about. I don't know if the tariff is the actual thing. Like Huawei is literally banned from the US. They're not allowed to sell here. They're not allowed to ship here. And for like security concerns was what the thing was. Same thing like that almost happened to TikTok, right? Or I guess it's in process of happening to TikTok where
Well, TikTok's another great example, right? And
yeah.
actually, I was thinking about this too. Sorry to interrupt, but I think this is relevant, Lucy. Is so, I mean, think about that. I mean, TikTok is driving culture more than anything else in the world right now. I've personally still never used the product, but I mean, look what's happening at Meta. Like, this is my other grand conspiracy is like Zuckerberg right now is breaking out the piggy bank and giving $100 million signing bonuses to AI engineers in a way that feels almost like he's panicking. And we saw this also with their massive capital expenditures on the quote unquote metaverse, which to this point have seemed to fizzle out or at least not lead to commensurate value creation in the market. And so I don't know. I mean, TikTok's another fantastic example of like the Chinese are winning right now on even on social apps too. And the thing that is driving culture.
Yeah, I don't know if importing stuff into the States is gonna upset the culture too much. Like, I mean, look, you could buy Li-Ning sneakers and Anta stuff in the US, but like it's not doing much for us, you know. They're not really breaking through and they would have to put a considerable amount of effort in order to do that. I don't think it's due to pricing increases because of tariffs that are actually preventing it. Like I don't know enough about it to really have a deep conversation, but I also don't think that like in that case they're prevented from doing business here. I think they're just not focused on it. And you know, this this idea of being sort of isolationist is not going to end well if like China has flying cars and stuff that we can't have. Like the script is going to flip really quickly if they have a bunch of cool stuff that we can't have. And then what's the point? Like how come we don't have that stuff and then we're going to get upset at leadership or whatever else, I don't know if tariffs are necessarily the reason. I understand what you're saying, but I also like I don't know how a set of like basketball shoes is going to impact our culture in a meaningful way.
Yeah, well, I don't know. And I mean, let's be very clear. I have no idea what I'm talking about here. And I don't know if it's the tariffs specifically are a reaction to this sort of perceived protectionism of American culture, and that being our most important export. But I mean, I think it is an interesting thought experiment of like, is Anta one huge partnership with Taylor Swift or Timothy Chalamet away from actually being a relevant player in the sporting and outdoor industry in the US, because they will be competitive on quality of manufacturing.
Yeah.
So really then the barrier for them to be successful is, can you connect with an American consumer or a global consumer? And the way you do that is through connecting with the culture, right? In a way that Nike has done so well for such a long period of time. So I don't know. I mean, I think one of the things that I used as a BPC, I mean, it's probably been a couple of months now, was that podcast episode with Nick Denton, where he makes the argument that China has already won this race for global leadership in technology and economy, but it's going to just take a while for it to become apparent to, the global population. And to me, I don't know, I think it's a very interesting moment in time where if power is shifting, it's, hopefully it can be done in a peaceful way, but also like, how can we as Americans, potentially borrow some of the things that has made China so successful in recent decades, and maybe be more competitive or protect against the economic devastation that this MIT economist was in some way forecasting.
The thing is, when it all comes down to it, you have someone who is developing best practices and innovating. What is the reason why you would ignore that in any scenario? Take China out of it. Like somebody who's crushing it, like wouldn't you be wanting to like study them and learn from them and essentially, take some inspiration or some of the essence? I mean, that's what they've been doing this whole time. They didn't have they didn't have electric cars. We started making electric cars. They started making electric cars. They started innovating on electric cars. Like, why wouldn't you be like, oh, that's cool, like we could probably learn something from that. They seem to have figured out how to make high speed. I mean, I've been on the maglev, which is a magnetic train. It goes 600 plus miles an hour, faster than an airplane on the ground. Like, oh, we should have one of those. Like I think we needed to sort of, I
Well,
don't know.
isn't that the perfect example too? Because where I live in the state of California, it's like an ongoing political joke about the train that was supposed to connect. What was it? It was like Sacramento to LA or San Francisco to LA, something like that. Just sort of take advantage of the flatland in the Central Valley in California and provide a piece of transportation infrastructure that hopefully adds value to the population of the state. And they've spent something like $40 billion on this train track and constructed like a single mile of the track, evidence of what we said earlier of just like our inability to get on the same page. Where in China, they'd probably get those permits passed, in 5
Yeah.
minutes, and they'd have construction underway within a week, and it'd be done within a year. It's like, how do you compete with that? And right now, we're not in a place where we can. And I'm not saying, I've never been to China, and I'm not saying like they're perfect or, that we should try and replicate them in any way. But fact is, if you can't start competing like that, you are going to be left behind. And I fear we're in the early phases of the US really being left behind.
That's basically what I saw, like that at scale. Like they've been building the magnetic tracks, they've been creating the future this entire time, and they're so focused on the future of like, yeah, we should invest in that. Let's do it, and just being like, great, let's go. The people that are in power there have had to go through so many rounds of, testing and education, and like it is a meritocracy in so many ways to get to that level, where over here it's like a game, like people get into politics to get famous. Over there it's like, no, you had to pass like the test and get the high score. And I don't know, like I don't know, I'm just telling you what I saw. Like people have really strong opinions when it comes to this country, but like I rode in a flying car and you don't have it here. I got to ride on a magnetic train. You don't have that here. I got to, do all these crazy things. And yeah, there are absolutely trade-offs, but like, man, like I was over there and I was like, it is not even close. It's not even close. And we should ignore this country at our own risk. So I don't know, like for me, like to bring it to, back to outdoor and everything, like there's tons of beautiful countryside out there. There are trails, there are opportunities to like do what we love to do in this country. And yes, it takes a couple extra steps and a very long flight to get there, but like wow, there's a lot to kind of uncover and discover and share and create. And I think the industry over there is really interested to see more of us coming over there. And also like they are exporting some pretty high level talent. So who who is over there? Like is there a Jim Walmsley lurking somewhere in the mountains of China right now?
I'm
You know?
sure. I'm sure. Well, yeah, and maybe that's a perfect place to just kind of bring this to a close. Is, it's obviously, I think at least my portion of this conversation has been a little bit more pessimistic, just kind of focusing on like what are the consequences of China being so futuristic and maybe so far ahead of the US. And, I guess one of the pieces of optimism was, at least for people like us, right? Like, what an interesting opportunity for free trail. I'd really love to carve out a little bit of time and find the right people to connect with to go over and do a trip in China and just see what the trail running scene is like there, and start to think about ways in which free trail might be able to service that part of the trail running economy. So anyway, things to be excited about and things to be optimistic about, even if, there is sort of like this grand competition that's happening at a much higher level than you and I occupy. So
You
really interesting convo.
I mean ultimately there's there's nothing I can do about tariffs and political climate or, country specific back and forth, but what I can do is nurture the mountain bike scene over there. And what you can do is nurture the trail running scene over there. And I feel like both are in a place that, are looking for some level of leadership and structure and format, and we can go over there and bring that. And the investment is there. They're excited for it. They want it. They're willing to support it. And it's really just the attention and intention that we can put into it that I think is going to return meaningful for both mountain biking and for trail running. I think really like putting the energy in, you're going to get a return where um it's a new area, and everything we bring there is going to be probably new and exciting. And the truth is that like there is something really special about American culture. And going over there, like we're sharing our knowledge, we're sharing our best practices, we're bringing and collaborating and working together. I think that's important, and I think that's useful, and I think that's going to deliver meaningful outcomes for everybody involved. And I hope I'm right.
Yeah, amen. And it's just striking me now, but you are an example of this. Once the Super Rider retail network becomes established as a mountain biking empire in China, that's effectively an example of us exporting a piece of American culture into China. That's exporting American mountain bike culture into a quote unquote emerging market. So, yeah.
Dude, and
Anyway,
also just time out for fun on this. Can you imagine if I had like their goal is like opening 100 shops over 3 years? That's like the goal, right? Could you imagine that would then make me probably the largest bike shop chain in the world, and I'd be in control of like what products showed up in that bike shop chain. Can
it's
you
amazing.
imagine? Can you
Well, I
imagine the
mean,
leverage I would have in a sponsorship negotiation if that were true?
dude, this would be like the ultimate case study in everything we've ever talked about on this podcast, right?
This is
Like,
like galaxy brain level
yes,
execution.
yeah, just
It's
like
all gonna.
start. Yeah, start with building the network, building the community through long form content, and then you have so much optionality to do so many other things, including having hundreds of mountain biking retail stores in China. You know, it used to be in the olden days, you have to start one brick and mortar store and then through, engaging with the community, then you build your brand and then you expand. But what you did was build the brand first and then everything evolves downstream of that. That's really the new way of building businesses. And this will be a very fun thing for us to talk about on the show here for hopefully months and years to come.
So
Amazing, amazing convo.
currently, the first shop is supposed to open in December of this year. So watch this space.
Live pod from Shenzhen, Debo and Lucy. All right. Well, hey, obviously I want to catch up on some of the stuff that we've been doing too, but let's save that for a future episode. But I just want to say I am recording this from the Little Nell Hotel, place where I used to work, a place where Harmony and I first met, where we were married, actually. And today I begin my long drive home back to California after being on the road for 5 weeks, starting at Broken Arrow, TrailCon, Western States, came out to Colorado for Hard Rock. And it's been probably the biggest 4 or 5 week push professionally in my career. And I'm excited to chat through some of that, including build off some of the conversation you and Steve had around TrailCon, but let's save that for a future episode. Sound good?
I mean, yeah, we got to dig into all of this stuff, and I'm really interested. I mean, now you've got a little window before UTMB, so we got some time to actually dig in, and get back on track. But I'm really interested here because I think we see the output of what you're doing, but like I'd be really curious to see the return on some of that stuff. Like, have you think really, critically about like, was it, is it worth it? But also like, what comes from just like punishing yourself for that long? I mean, it looked like everything turned out so well. Like the Western States live stream was absolutely crushed it, and TrailCon absolutely crushed it. Like everything looks like it absolutely smashed, but you're probably extremely smashed as well after all that. So it'd be interesting to hear you sort of reflect on all the energy that went in and sort of the return that you felt like you got.
Yeah, let's talk about that in a future episode. But that Western States live stream alone deserves like a long, deep dive conversation because it exploded. It seems like it's achieved some sort of escape velocity. I think it was something like the number one stream on YouTube that day, or maybe it was like within the sporting category. So, and then a couple of fun things have happened. I mean, multiple times now since the Western States live stream, somebody has been like, "Oh, you're the guy from Western States." They don't have any idea who I am, no idea about my running career, no idea about Free Trail, but like I was in Telluride. It was the night I got in after driving there from Western States, and I was like, "All right, I need a beer." Go into the local bottle shop, walk outside, and somebody's like, "Hey, great job on the broadcast." And it's like there's something happening in trail running, and I think the Western States live broadcast is leading. It's the tip of the spear in shoving trail running culture into a more mainstream consciousness. So anyway,
Wait,
more fodder for future conversation.
I want to pull this just quickly into the pod because I think this is important. We had a text exchange after the Steve pod, and one of the things we were talking about is how your sport has gone from this identity of ultra running into trail running, and you just said the word trail running like 6 times in a row. So I gotta ask, like, you mentioned that it was intentional that you started referring to ultra running as trail running, because I remember when I signed you to Red Bull, like it was ultra runner, like all day. That was like the focus. And even in my head, like the idea of ultra was like such an aspirational, like, whoa, that's crazy. Like no one does that. And I'd be really curious, like the intention of switching from like, why did you stop referring to it as ultra running?
It's funny. I don't want to pat myself on the back too much, and I'm somebody who very rarely is able to step back and appreciate anything I've done. But this has been something I have very intentionally done with Free Trail that you and Steve noticed, and that, I'd like to think we've been leaders on, is transitioning from thinking of the sport as ultra running and using trail as the broader umbrella term under which there are subcategories. People call the shorter distance stuff sub ultra. Then, of course, you have like the classic ultra running distances, 50K to 100 miles. And now we've got what I call super ultras, these like 100+ mile distances. And we've seen this massive expansion and interest in 200+ mile racing. So using trail running as the broader umbrella sporting term, it gives a brand like mine, Free Trail, the opportunity to cover all the different aspects of the sport while keeping it, at least in the mind of the consumer and the mind of the audience, as being all loosely connected. So a vertical race that takes 25 minutes is thought of as being part of the same culture and the same community as the Cocodona 250-mile race. I think it's just good for business. The thing that we say internally that I never really have talked about publicly is that Free Trail wants to be an inch wide and 100 miles deep, right?
Mm.
So we talk about trail and trail only. Like, I'm not covering track and field. I don't go to the Boston Marathon or whatever. But, we will talk about, with equal enthusiasm, we'll talk about a 20-minute vertical race in the same conversation that we'll talk very enthusiastically about a 60-hour ultra marathon. So that's how I think about it. And I do think it is catching on to where trail is more of the term of art that people use, and less and people use the word ultra running for very specific application, for a very specific description of what I would consider a subcategory of trail running. So
Mm.
thanks for noticing, buddy.
Yeah, of course. It's interesting. Uh, Electronic music did something very similar. They sort of branded themselves as EDM ages ago. There's a big interview with, I think, Deadmau5 that talked about it. Same thing, where they were like, we all make music with computers, and it has like these very similar things, and so it made it easier to say like, oh, I'm a fan of EDM. I like dubstep and I like drum and bass, and I like whatever. And I think it made it like more. It was easier to sort of jump between the different genres within EDM and still consider yourself kind of listening to the same stuff. And I think in the same way, like probably the biggest problem in terms of growth that ultra running specifically had was that the barrier to entry was crazy high, right? Like, oh, you have to run more than a marathon to even be in our group. And now with trail running, it's like you could literally just do like a 1 mile trail run and you're in our group. Like you've made it more accessible, and you've by definition grown it because you've now included all these subcategories together of like, we like running on dirt and rocks and roots and whatever. Like, that's it. What might also be interesting is that because of that, you've now made it where the barrier to entry is lower, where you might get other people coming in that aren't as bought into the culture, that are, the influencer mindset of like, oh, all I got to do is like run down the street, to my local park, and now all of a sudden I can, do brand sponsorships, but I've never run more than 10 miles at a time, or whatever. Like that could end up being I don't want to say downside. There's nothing wrong necessarily with it, but like, yeah, like if you had run over a marathon in distance, you obviously were very committed to this community and this culture. Do you think that there's ever a case that being so, accepting of literally everybody that runs on dirt could actually sort of backfire?
No way. No way. Let's save that for future. But I do, because I think, if we don't pause, we'll end up talking about everything here. And I do want to, I still haven't collected all my thoughts about.
We'll tee it up. This is a
Yeah,
future pod for sure.
Yeah,
I
but
want to come back to this.
I do think, right, like that. Okay, so I did the Western States live broadcast. My shift was 15, or no, it was probably 17 of the 31-hour broadcast. Amazing. It's always a highlight of every year. And shout out to Billy Yang, Topher Gaylord, the whole team that Mountain Outpost, the whole team that actually puts it together. Corinne and I obviously have the best job in the world just sitting there and talking about it, but it's a huge effort. The week before, Lucy, this is a fun place to finish, okay? The week before, I did the live broadcast for the Golden Trail World Series event at Broken Arrow. That during my broadcast, my brother texted our family chain, "Hey, everybody, go turn on HBO. Dylan is doing the live broadcast for Broken Arrow on HBO." So Warner Brothers Discovery, who owns Max or whatever, um, they've got this distribution partnership now with the Golden Trail World Series. So just evidence more like trail running is going a little bit more mainstream, not only with our numbers absolutely dominating at Western States, but my brother just going onto HBO or Max or whatever to watch a cycling event and noticing, holy smokes, Dylan is actually on a streaming service right now. So I don't know. And that's another good example of what we're just talking about now of like, okay, Western States is Western States, a 100-mile race, clearly an ultra marathon. But Golden Trail, that race took an hour and 45 minutes, I think, for the men's winner, 2 hours for the women. That is an incredibly cool viewing experience and should be viewed in the same, like, as a similar sport as Western States, right? And how great is it that I'm able to attach my voice and, at least by extension, attach free trail to both these different disciplines that are equally interesting, that have equally important things attached to them, but that take one race is 15 hours longer than the other. So I don't know. There's just so much to be excited about with trail running right now, and there's a lot to unpack from the last month on the road. But I think part of that unpacking is going to be exploring the question of, was it worth it? And so I'd be happy to be transparent about that, at least with things that are not, too sensitive. But
Yeah.
I do have thoughts about it. I mean, especially as it relates to TrailCon. But
I have some strong opinions about HBO and Max and all that stuff too, with regard to live streaming sports. So that's another conversation. But I feel like, yeah, there's another very full pod just brewing based off the last like 5 minutes of this one.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's force ourselves to stop there. It's been so long since we caught up, but a lot more to chat about. All right, BPC, I'll go first here. This is a quick and easy one for me, and is, I think, just related to things that we talk about on the pod all the time. Lucy, I'm sure you saw, but do you know Ben Gibbard, the front man for Death Cab for Cutie?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so have just recently done a collab with him through Speedland. The product is called the GSTMT, which is short for the Tiger Mountain Trail, which is a trail running sanctuary just outside of Seattle, where Ben Gibbard has always made his home. And in addition to being a world famous musician, Ben has been a very committed trail runner for a long time. And he just finished the Western States 100 a few short weeks ago. And so it felt like good timing to just tell our audience about this product, because it is sort of similar to a lot of things that we discuss on the show, of just like taking somebody who has an important and, I don't know, large influence in a community and making a product in such a way, yeah, like having something that has commercial aspirations and a commercial end game in a way that is, downstream of a specific individual's influence, if that made any sense. You get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. So cool that there are people doing I mean, obviously people relevant in other areas of culture that are getting into trail running. And I feel like that list continues to grow year over year too, of people that have kind of discovered it. And going back to our previous conversation, the way that you've sort of rebranded or whatever the sport, I think is going to only make it easier for more and more people from other parts of our culture to jump in and be part of it. That's cool. That's really cool. Okay, I'm going kind of a different direction with my BPC. I guess this is sort of a content thing, but actually, I'll let you guys work it out. Basically, as far as content, there's a format of content that I absolutely loved when I was growing up that I have not seen done since, and I want to see it come back. So, a little primer in the world of BMX, there used to be a company by the name of Props, and Props put out a video magazine which inspired me tremendously within the mountain bike world. I had a video magazine called Match Video Scene way back in the day. Anyway, that was like my first video thing I ever did. Props had this series called Road Fools, and Road Fools was a BMX video series, and they had like a tour bus, like a proper tour bus, and they would load up 10 to 12 of the best BMXers on the planet onto this tour bus, and they would take them through different parts of the country or different parts of the world at one point, and they would put all these BMXers together. A lot of them had never met before or ridden together before, and they would go to skate parks, they go street riding, they do all these different things together, and they would capture it in this one film. And it was so cool to see your favorite Canadian BMX rider riding with this dude from England or, whatever. And what are they like off the bike? What are they like on the bike? And putting him in kind of new territories, new scenarios to put together these amazing videos together. And I loved Road Fools, and I don't understand why that format hasn't been copy pasted into literally every sport at this point, especially with the frequency of which you could do stuff like that on YouTube. There was one other example called Drop In. They did a mountain bike version of it, like late 90s, early 2000s, but I would love to see that get copy pasted into some other sports. Like, how cool would that be to see your favorite trail runners get like thrown into a bus, and then you just take them all over Colorado, for example, to run like the legendary trails? And maybe it's not the same as BMX because there's tricks being done and then people get hyped on the tricks, but I feel like there's a way to like show that in a cool way. I don't know. I just love this concept. Road Fools is obviously extremely dated, and maybe some of the stuff hasn't necessarily aged as well, but still, I love the idea of taking like all your favorite athletes from the sport and jamming them together and seeing how they interact, and like basically like taking the jar and shaking it up a little bit,
Yeah. Well, Ricky Gates has done something similar in trail running, but hasn't made content around it. I just saw him at Western State, so we can close on this. But he has a little project that he calls Bus Run Bus, where he takes paying customers on like a novel trail running retreat where they'll fly into, for example, San Francisco. They jump on a bus. He drove them to the Western States finish line to start. I'm pretty sure I'm getting this right. So imagine coming on this trail running retreat and immediately being taken to the Western States finish line just to drink it in. And then that night, overnight, they drove the bus to Mendocino, to the Northern California coast, to begin their trail running bus tour of California. So I think they stopped through like Marin County, Yosemite, the Eastern Sierra. So I guess the missing link there is just to document it all and distribute it on YouTube, because that would be a very similar format and I think a very engaging video. So
Yeah, the world needs more Ricky Gates.
it's 100%. I'm gonna have him on the Free Trail Pod. Maybe it would be fun to have him on the Second Nature eventually too.
Yeah.
All right, buddy. Well, man, so good to reconnect and get back on the horn. Second Nature is alive and well, even though we've gone to one episode a week, and I don't know if I've been on an episode for a little while, but it's always good to chit chat with you, buddy. And congrats on everything that's going on with Super Rider, and can't wait to continue to explore this China market and what you're doing over there too.
Honestly, it's just going to come down to execution at this point. Like the idea, the interest, the energy is there. It's just a matter of actually executing. So we're going to find out. I feel like I've kind of put my stake in the ground here. Like now everybody listening to this is going to be like, is he going to pull it off? So here we go.
Unfortunate reality of business. It's all about the execution, even though the only fun part of it is coming up with ideas.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. All right. On that note, for Aaron Lutzi, I'm Debo. See you guys next time.